Hi, I'm Paul Leiser. In this video, I'll guide you through the initial setup and configuration of simple chat as an administrator, starting from your first login after deployment all the way through enabling key capabilities. Right after deployment, navigate to the home page secured by Easy Auth. This protects your app during early configuration while public endpoints are active. Once the app is verified, you can disable Easy Auth. Simple Chat uses MSAL internally for authentication, so you're safe to proceed. Log in with an administrator account that has the admin's role assigned in your Entra ID app registration. Start in the General tab. Begin by updating the application title. Just click in the text box and type the name you want users to see. Next, you can control the display of your brand by toggling the Show Logo option on or off. You can also hide the application title if you prefer a more minimal look. Upload a custom logo and favicon by clicking the respective upload buttons and selecting your image files. Scroll down to the page text section. This is where you can enter a welcome message using Markdown. You'll also see a Markdown alignment option. Use this to align your message left, center, or right, depending on your formatting preference. This is a great place to welcome users or link to onboarding materials. Next, toggle Enable Dark Mode by default if you want the interface to load in dark mode for all users by default. Keep in mind that users can still manually toggle between dark and light modes at any time from the top navigation bar. Lastly, expand the classification banner section to display a banner across the top of every page. This is an optional but helpful feature if you want to display a constant message like an environment label or a compliance tag. Next, select the GPT tab. This is where you configure access to Azure OpenAI. You have two options. Connect directly to the Azure OpenAI endpoint or use Azure API Management, also called APIM, as a gateway. If you're using APIM, toggle the switch labeled Use APIM instead of Direct GPT Endpoint. Then, fill in the Azure APIM endpoint, the APIM API version, and the deployment name. Note that deployment names must be entered as a comma-separated list. Finally, provide your Azure APIM subscription key. If you're using the direct Azure OpenAI endpoint, make sure the toggle is set to use the direct path. Then enter the Azure OpenAI GPT endpoint URL. This corresponds to the endpoint of your Azure OpenAI resource in the Azure portal or the Azure AI Foundry. Next, choose your authentication type, either key or managed identity. If you choose managed identity, ensure that your Azure App Service has a system-assigned managed identity enabled, and that identity has been assigned the Cognitive Services user role on your Azure OpenAI resource. Then, provide your Azure subscription ID and resource group name. If you're using key authentication instead, enter your Azure OpenAI key from the portal or AI Foundry. Once you've filled in the appropriate configuration for your selected method, click Save. Then click Fetch GPT models to retrieve the available model deployments. A list will appear showing all models exposed by your endpoint. Check the boxes for the models you want to make available to users. Any model you select will be highlighted in green and will appear as a selectable option in the chat interface. Finally, click Save again to store your model selections. Select the Embeddings tab to configure how vector embeddings are generated for your application. Just like in the GPT tab, you must first choose whether you're using a direct Azure OpenAI endpoint or an Azure API Management or APM endpoint. If you're using APM, toggle on Use APM instead of Direct Endpoint. Then fill in the Azure APM endpoint URL, the APM API version, and the APIM deployment name. Note that the deployment name must be a single string, such as text embedding ADA002 or text embedding 3 small. After that, enter your APIM subscription key. If you're using the direct Azure OpenAI embedding endpoint, make sure the APIM toggle is turned off. Enter your Azure OpenAI embedding endpoint URL, which you can find in the Azure portal or Azure AI Foundry. Select your authentication type, either key or managed identity. If you use managed identity, confirm that your app service has a system-assigned identity enabled and that it has the Cognitive Services user role assigned on the Azure OpenAI resource. Then enter your Azure subscription ID and resource group name. If you are using key authentication, you must also provide the Azure OpenAI key. After completing all required fields, click Save to store your configuration. Then click Fetch Embedding Models. Unlike the GPT tab, only one embedding model can be selected. Choose the embedding model you'd like to use, such as Text Embedding 3 Small or Text Embedding ADA002, and then click Save again. This selected model will be used for all embedding operations across the application. It's recommended to maintain consistency and use the same model throughout your deployment unless you upgrade to a newer compatible version. Navigate to the Image Generation tab to configure DAL-E-based image generation for your users. Start by toggling on Enable Image Generation. Just like the GPT and Embeddings tabs, you must then choose whether you're using a direct Azure OpenAI endpoint or an Azure API Management or APIM endpoint. If you're using APIM, toggle on the option labeled Use APIM instead of Direct Endpoint. Then fill in the Azure APIM endpoint URL, the APIM API version, the APIM deployment name, most likely DAL-E3, and your APIM subscription key. Click Save to store the configuration. If you're using the direct Azure OpenAI endpoint, make sure the APIM toggle is turned off. Enter your Azure OpenAI image generation endpoint URL, which you can find in the Azure portal or Azure AI Foundry. Select your authentication type, either key or managed identity. If you're using managed identity, ensure your Azure App Service has a system-assigned identity enabled and that it has been granted the Cognitive Services user role on your Azure OpenAI resource. Then enter your Azure subscription ID and resource group. If you're using key authentication, provide your Azure OpenAI key. After completing the form, click Save. Then click Fetch to retrieve available image generation models. At this time, you may only select one model. Currently, the only supported model is DAL-E3. Once selected, click Save again. Enabling this feature will also activate the image generation button in the chat interface, allowing users to generate images from natural language prompts. Switch to the Scale tab. To enable Redis caching, toggle the Enable Redis Cache option. Then enter your Redis host address, choose the authentication type, and paste in your Redis access key. Click Test Cache Connection to verify that everything is configured correctly. Using Azure Redis Cache is strongly recommended when moving beyond a dev test setup and into a staging or production environment. Redis enables scaling the app across multiple Azure App Service instances, up to 32 if needed. It's also required if you plan to deploy multiple simple chat instances behind a load balancer like Azure Front Door or Application Gateway. Move to the Workspaces tab. Here you can configure user and group level collaboration spaces. First, toggle on Enable Your Workspace to allow each user to have their private workspace for uploading documents and prompts. If you want to support shared collaboration, also toggle on Enable My Groups to activate group-based workspaces. You can choose to enable one or both features depending on your organization's needs. To control who can create groups, enable Require Membership to create groups. This will restrict group creation to users assigned the Create Groups role. Next, scroll down to the Multimedia Support section. Toggle on support for audio files and video files. If you enable video support, you'll need to configure video indexer settings. These include the endpoint, API version, location, account ID, account name, subscription ID, resource group, and the API key. If you're enabling audio support, you'll need a deployed Azure Speech Service. For this, provide the region or location, the locale, and the API key. Further down, you'll find metadata extraction. Enable this option if you want to automatically extract summaries, keywords, authors, and other metadata from uploaded files. Finally, enable document classification to allow users to tag uploaded files with sensitivity or usage labels like confidential, CUI, or public. You can edit, remove, or add new classification labels to align with your organization's data governance policies. These classifications can be assigned by users at upload time and will carry through into any conversations that reference those documents. Open the Citations tab. Standard citations are always enabled. To support Enhanced Citations, toggle Enable Enhanced Citations. then paste in your storage account connection string. This allows users to view source documents and jump to the cited location in videos or audio transcripts. Go to the Safety tab. This is where you can enable content safety and user backup features to support governance, moderation, and trust. Start by enabling content safety. When this is turned on, every user message is scanned and processed through your organization's content safety policy before it reaches the language model. This helps enforce safety and compliance standards across all interactions. If you're using API management or APIM, enable the APIM toggle here. Then enter your APIM endpoint type and API key. If you're using a direct Azure OpenAI endpoint, enter the endpoint and either your API key or configure managed identity access. Click Test Safety Connection to confirm that everything is working. Next, toggle Enable User Feedback to allow users to rate AI responses with thumbs up or thumbs down. This feedback is stored for review by designated administrators. Beneath that, you'll find role-based access controls for both feedback and safety violations. You can restrict visibility and moderation capabilities to users who are assigned specific roles, such as feedback reviewers or safety violation admins. This allows you to separate those responsibilities from general app administrators, offering more granular control. Lastly, enable conversation archiving. This is highly recommended for any production or compliance-driven environment. Without archiving, when a user deletes a conversation, it is permanently erased. With archiving enabled, deleted conversations are simply hidden from the user's view and moved to dedicated archive containers in Cosmos DB. This preserves the full conversation and message history for auditing, compliance, or incident review. Navigate to the Search and Extract tab. This tab controls how Simple Chat performs document indexing and retrieval, and how it optionally connects to external web search. You'll see the option to enable Bing Web Search. While still functional, this capability is being deprecated and will transition to Azure AI agents via semantic kernel later this year. If you choose to enable it now, enter your Bing Search API key and click Test Web Search Connection to confirm it's working. Next is Azure AI Search. If you've enabled either your Workspace or group workspaces, configuring AI search is mandatory. This is the core index that powers hybrid search across uploaded documents. Provide your Azure AI Search endpoint and API key. If you're using API management, toggle the APIM switch and provide the APIM endpoint and subscription key as needed. Below that is the Document Intelligence section. This service is also required if you've enabled Workspaces. Enter your Document Intelligence endpoint and API key, then click Test Connection to validate. Document Intelligence is used to extract content from supported document types, including Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and PDFs. Here's how the full ingestion pipeline works. When a user uploads a document, Simple Chat first determines the file type. Supported formats like Word and PDF are processed by Document Intelligence, which extracts the raw text. Other formats like Markdown, HTML, or plain text files are parsed directly. All files are then broken into smaller pieces called chunks and stored in Azure AI Search. When a user asks a question, the system doesn't search the original files. Instead, it performs a hybrid search against the AI search index. This combines semantic keyword matching with vector similarity using an embedding of the question. A semantic re-ranker then reorders the top candidates based on relevance. The best matches, typically the top 12, are passed to the model, which reasons over them to generate a grounded response. If any of those sources contributed to the final answer, they will be cited directly in the chat interface, allowing users to trace answers back to the supporting documents. Next, open the Other tab. Set the maximum file upload size, for example, to 1,500 megabytes. Then set the conversation history limit to a number like 8. This defines how many past messages are remembered in each chat session. You can also toggle Enable File Processing Logs for debugging and optionally enable an external health check API endpoint for monitoring. And that's the complete admin setup for Simple Chat. You've configured branding, AI integration, document handling, safety tools, and much more. With these settings in place, your app is ready to support users securely and effectively.